Good afternoon, everyone, or depending where you're joining us in the world today, good morning or perhaps good evening. Thank you for joining the Reinvigorating Race Dive In 2024 session. My name is Tyreish Softleigh-Palmer, and I'm Business Manager at Lloyds, responsible for the Inclusive Futures programme. Before we go into the session, and a little bit of a spoiler of what is coming up, I'd just like to take a moment to show you the objectives for the session, which we really hope we equip everyone to walk away with. Don't worry too much for now. We will bring these up at the end where we will have a bit more time to reflect. Since the George Floyd murder in 2020, many organisations made concerted efforts to ramp up their DEI and ethnicity plans. We are 4 years on now, and some companies have made varied progress, some moving the needle, others less so. During this event, we will have two sections where we will be discussing the challenges business face across the insurance industry, where we need to keep discussions on the agenda. We will also be talking best practice, Lloyd's response to the involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, and discussing some lived experiences. I do understand for some, there may be parts of this session that may be hard to listen to. So if at any point you do feel uncomfortable, triggered, or overwhelmed, please feel free to drop off. We have factored some time in for Q&A. However, please feel free to start sending your questions in the chat during the session. When asking your questions, please do indicate who it is aimed at so we can ensure you get the response from the desired person. I'd like to introduce the panel for the first part of the session, where I'm really pleased to be joined by Alex Mohabir, Commercial Manager at Mercer, Mahil, Head of Distribution Operations at AXA XL, Kavan Bakhda, Dispute Resolutions Partner at Kennedy's, and Rabia, Suddle, Legal Counsel at Gallagher's, and Nancy Easton, Alliance Strategy and Growth Director for the UK at KPMG. So thank you everyone for joining me. I'm really looking forward to having this discussion. So let's get into it. Alex, I'd like to start with you, please. I know we've had lots of conversations in the build up to getting prepared for today. Lots of companies accelerated their race inclusion efforts in 2020, but I think it's safe to say momentum seems to have slowed down a bit. How would you recommend re-engaging colleagues on the topic?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm not too sure what's caused the slowdown of pace, and whether it's a political piece or there's less media attention. But one thing we do at Marsh & McLennan, or Mercer Marsh, is the use of employee resource groups or business resource groups. And that's where we as a group of colleagues see it's our responsibility to keep the subject relevant and at the forefront of our executives' minds, right? So, and we feel like we act as the voice of our ethnically diverse community. So one of the initiatives we've been kind of really pushing at the last 18 months at MMC is kind of us releasing our ethnicity pay gap reports. So what's the difference in pay across our colleagues for our diverse people? And so I think what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to show the challenges from a data perspective. And then once we can confront the issue and we've got the hard numbers, I think that what then allows us to do is work with our executives, partner with HR to drive some real valuable, tangible actions on how we drive that equity across our industry and businesses.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex. And just building on that point and a few things you've said, I think it's really important to be talking about lived experiences in these situations. So Bal and Rabia, I'd love to come to you if I could. And if you could both tell me, well, everyone, what it is like being an ethnic minority in what is a predominantly white industry. And what are the ways in which your ethnic background has or can hinder your career development or networking opportunities?
I'm happy to start. So having worked in both banking and insurance industries during my career, both being predominantly male white industries, and being an Asian Muslim female from a working class background, I feel I've been aware and to an extent conscious of who I am, or better yet, how different I am. My lived experience over the years has shown me how those differences are treated has changed over time. I recall early in my career being asked during a work call if I'm based in a call center due to my uncommon sounding name, and not feeling like I had a voice. Too many years later, now being at Gallagher, where I see diversity is recognized as a strength. I'm empowered and supported to be myself. I'm actively encouraged to share my lived experiences. And over the years, I feel there's a genuine interest in wanting to make at Gallagher, and then I guess the larger industry as well, more reflective of the society in which we live. A bit like was mentioned previously, I think as employees, we're taking a proactive approach with us at Gallagher through the Multi-Ethnic and Racial Alliance Committee to do work to make this change. For the last 2 years, we've successfully run a reverse mentoring scheme for ethnic minority colleagues. We've celebrated faiths, cultures, and diversity through various events, partnered with charities such as Voyage Youth and Local Village Network to attract more diverse talent into the industry. And I guess now when I attend a meeting or a call, there's still often times when I may be the only female or person from an ethnic background, but I feel my unique perspective is respected and valued. I feel heard, and I think insurance industry is making good progress, but I think events like today and that have been taking place through Diving are a good way of measuring progress while still holding the industry accountable by highlighting what more needs to be done.
Yeah, and I think, look, I can build a little bit on that as well. And let me just start by saying, when I joined the industry, I don't want to count the years, but more than 10 years ago, it was very different. And I think we have made progress in this space, and there's still more work to do. I think when I joined, and particularly at AXA XL, it was very different. So walking around the common areas, I wouldn't really see that many people that look like me or people of color. So, when I did see somebody, it almost felt like a high five moment. It almost felt like okay, I'm not the only one here. So it sort of gave me a bit of confidence. I think when I first joined the industry, I was very maybe shy or reluctant to share my lived experiences or my reactions to macro events. Just wouldn't talk about them. And I think some of that is down to just cultural upbringing as well. So I'm a first British, Indian, Asian. My parents are immigrants from North India. And very much when we were growing up, we were told to keep our heads down, do well at school, and that was the way to be successful. And I think, some of those cultural learnings, we have to unlearn or learn to adapt because, just keeping your head down and not doing some of the things that we know help move careers forwards, like networking, like building deep, meaningful relationships with brokers and clients, is what our industry is built on. So, insurance is a people business. And if you're not comfortable doing that, that could maybe hinder parts of your career progression. So I think for me, a lot of the learning has been around seeing some of those blind spots for me culturally and spending time on self-awareness and just getting involved in some of those activities that felt out of my comfort zone.
Thank you both for sharing. I know it can be tough to talk about lived experiences, but I think the harsh reality is we have to get comfortable with having these uncomfortable conversations. Kavan, how can we encourage people at all levels of organisations to get comfortable with being uncomfortable?
I think there are a few different ways that we can go about it. And in my experience, I think continuing the conversation and participating in the conversation is the key issue. But I'd point to perhaps 3 different initiatives that we've had going at Kennedy's. The first one was to establish an affinity group called Embrace, of which I'm the senior sponsor. And the role of Embrace is effectively to try and help foster conversations between all different stakeholders within the firm, so that we've got conversations between our trainees and also our partners and everyone else in between. We also have a reciprocal mentoring program, and that's one of the ways that we've been trying to drive inclusion at the firm by raising awareness of the variety of lived experiences to ensure that all of our talent, regardless of race, ethnicity, or heritage, have a voice at Kennedy's. The aim of the scheme at Kennedy's is to try and foster a mutually beneficial relationship between more junior colleagues from ethnically diverse backgrounds or mentors and more senior colleagues who are the mentees. During these one-on-one mentoring sessions, mentors and mentees have the difficult conversations on topics including, but not limited to, inclusion, allyship, career development, race and ethnicity in the legal profession. We also have race fluency workshops, and the aim of these workshops is to try and support our senior leaders to be more vigilant in identifying racial inequalities and to be better equipped themselves to proactively challenge non-inclusive behaviour in the workplace. These workshops form a key part of our race action plan and underpin our DE&I strategy. So I'm saying it's more about ensuring that the conversation takes place and being part of it yourself.
Amazing, thank you. And you said something there that about early careers and a younger generation joining. I think they're really tapped into what the culture of companies are like at the moment. They're doing lots of research before they even apply for jobs. Alex, I'd be interested to hear from you a little bit more on that. How does company culture and psychological safety play a role in creating barriers when it comes to talking about racism and also anti-racism, inclusion, race, and ethnicity?
Yeah, this is a tough one, right? So we know, and everyone on this call, some of the challenges we face as a community might not be seen as a challenge to your average colleague, right? So one of the things that we've seen, and without getting too political, is kind of like the polarization or the rise of the far right, for example, and the impact that's having on our colleagues about coming to work and being their authentic selves. Because there is like an impact where some of our colleagues are feeling triggered or not feeling safe, and it's not just impacting our community, it's also kind of impacting our colleagues in the LGBTQ plus community. So one thing that we've been doing in MMC is really partnering with our HR leaders to go, there's a challenge here, there's a space that we need to have a conversation. So what we've done actually over the last few months is develop a training session for our people managers to how to approach these issues and how to open those conversations with their teams to allow for that safe space and to bring that psychological safety back to the workplace. And funny enough, we're having the first training session on Monday. So I'll try to keep everyone updated on how that goes.
Amazing, thank you. And Beau, I'd like to come to you actually. Alex has just given a couple of examples what's happening at his firm. It would be really interesting to see how you've managed to improve racial inclusion at AXA XL.
Yeah, happy to share. Around 4 years ago, myself and a colleague created the multicultural group, the first one for the UK at AXA XL. And I think when we started that group, we kind of understood that we wanted it to be more than a group that got together and discussed some of the ways that we felt about being ethnic minorities in a predominantly white industry, male white industry. So we very much started out thinking about our network group as a business idea. So with any business, you need to have a data, you need to have the strategy. So one of the first things we did was look at our data disclosure within the company. And we ran a pretty tight campaign for 6 months where we did a lot of awareness training. We did a lot of talking in team meetings around why this was an important topic, but also talking to our colleagues around some of the difficult conversations. Why did we need to have this? We have a gender group. Why did we need to now have a race group? Why was that important? And, you know, until we had that data, and some of the senior conversations we had in the organization was around, it's the right thing to do. And we had a lot of people on board because they believed it was the right thing to do. But we also needed to engage the minds through the data. So by collecting the data, we could then understand where we were as a industry and also within the organization, what our landscape looked like. So I think for anybody starting out, trying to engage companies or colleagues, I think data is really important. And then the second piece for us was around strategy. So people are at the heart of our organizations, are at the heart of our strategy. And for us, it was important to make sure that I&D goals were also congruent with the corporate strategy. And one of the things that we've done in the UK is to make sure that everybody has an I&D goal that's embedded within their performance and review for their goals at the end of the year. And I think what that does is it really starts to align people towards the strategy, not just the business strategy, but also the cultural strategy that we're trying to embed. And then I think just to round that off, the last couple of things that we've done, which I've seen have really started to provide benefit to colleagues in the organisation, is around learning and development. So this isn't you create it once, it's done, you do the data, you publish the report. As Alex said, it's a continuous learning cycle. So we've done things like bias training that's gone out to everybody in the UK. And I think that's provided a very level field for everybody to have that basic understanding. And then additional to that, we've created mentoring programs that are run throughout the year. Traditional mentoring programs, but also reverse mentoring. So that's where we have colleagues from ethnic minorities mentoring some of our senior leaders in the organisation. And I think that's been extremely eye-opening for some of the leaders and also some of the mentees, because it gives them an opportunity to engage with maybe senior leaders that they wouldn't normally have engaged with. So I think those are the few things that I've seen work at AXA XL. And more broadly, you know, there's networks such as the Insurance Cultural Awareness Network that offer some of these initiatives and programs, certainly around mentoring. So if, you know, organizations don't have their own mentoring programs, that's a platform that they can engage with as well.
Thanks, Val. I personally think it's really important when having these kind of discussions, we do have allies to give a healthy balance. Nancy, so really pleased to be joined by you in this discussion. What can organisations put in place to create an inclusive culture for all?
So this is quite a broad question, and we've already heard some really great examples of what, you know, the various companies that are represented on this are already doing. But for me, I just want to talk about three things really that I've seen. For me, it's the first touch point that you have with a company is really, really important, because that starts your journey with them and makes you feel heard and seen. So it's really important to get that from that very first touch point with a potential candidate, right? And so one of the things is around making sure that hiring process are as unbiased as possible. And that can be even down to just like the language and the nuances in the job description that you publish, making sure that your interviewers are trained, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, that's one of the key processes and entry points into your organization. So making sure that, you know, you're thinking about it right from day one. And then more broadly, obviously, open communication and feedback is really, really key, making everybody feel that they have a voice and that there's a platform for them to share their concerns or feedback. And, you know, there's two schools of thought on this, but I think it's really, really important as well to be able for people to be able to share their feedback anonymously. Not everybody feels comfortable to do that and put their name to it. So I think that having a mechanism around raising concerns or issues anonymously is really, really important for companies as well. And then the final one, and we've touched on a few different kind of mentorship or reverse mentorship programs that a couple of the other panelists talked about. I feel super lucky to have been involved in KPMG's cross-company allyship program. This is where we've had, I think it's 1,000 participants now from Black heritage and ethnic minority groups. And we've involved different organisations, so 40 different organisations have been involved in it, and it's kind of over 3 countries now. And what I like about this is that it provides people with an opportunity to meet people from other organisations, have quite an objective conversation because you're not talking to somebody in your organisation. And also it means that we can share learnings across organisations about how best to tackle some of the themes that come up and share learning across organisations. And for me personally, it's enabled me to step up and help someone succeed. I've had the most fabulous mentees. And they, you know, it's not because they don't have the skills or the ability, but everybody, as I say, everybody I've mentored has been really, really great at what they do. But the reality is that we don't live in a world that's equal. So if I can help or contribute in any way, I found that really, really rewarding. So they're my 3 examples. But Rabia, I know that when we were doing the prep for this as well, you had a few examples. I think it was a reverse mentoring program in your organisation.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. I think similar to yourself, Kavan and Val, we've already touched on similar initiatives, but my most recent and probably best example of allyship has come from reverse mentoring scheme as well. So over the past year, I've been engaging in partnership with my mentee, who's Ian Curtin, the UK CEO for Gallagher Re. and just to help raise awareness and understanding of challenges faced by ethnic minority colleagues. And I guess to really just open, honest, and very vulnerable conversations, we've delved into what I would say are probably really deep and important topics in relation to race. We've spoken about barriers, biases, prejudices, lived experiences, and to our pleasant surprise, discovered a huge amount of similarities between us as well. This partner's fostered an allyship, particularly kind of, which has been evident during the recent riots. And I know we kind of touched on that a little bit, but when myself and my family were directly impacted, it's created a relationship where I felt comfortable sharing my experience, and in turn kind of received this genuine willingness and want to support me and my family. And I think that plays a huge part of when you're coming to work. Obviously, your family is your family and outside work, but sometimes what's happening outside can kind of flow into your work life, and having that kind of relationship, I think, is really important. And I guess broader than that as well. As part of our conversations, we've identified areas of improvements and are actively developing actions that we can implement within Gallagher as a whole. So yeah, I think it's really important to kind of have that within the workplace.
Amazing, thank you. Some really good examples of allyship there, which I think all of us, including myself, can learn from. Kavan, I'd just like to come back to you and leaning into your experience as a senior leader and partner at Kennedy's. How can we keep leaders and colleagues accountable when it comes to not only having conversations about race and ethnicity, but ensuring the workplace is ethnically diverse?
Sure. So I think when we try to consider this, what we look to do is to attract, promote, and retain our diverse talent. And if I take a couple of examples at, I suppose, both ends of the spectrum, with our early careers, we have contextual recruitment. So we use software that flags students that are academically have academically outperformed when you take into account certain lived experiences. We also use blind CVs so that we don't include any personal details which refer to an applicant's identity markers. We also take into consideration the Mansfield rule, which aims to boost representation among historically underrepresented lawyers in law firm. Kennedy's is Mansfield certified. It requires us to consider a diverse slate of candidates. To achieve Mansfield rule certification, law firms must track and measure that they have considered at least 30% diverse candidates for leadership and governance roles, equity promotions, and formal client pitch opportunities. The other end of the spectrum is, of course, within the partnership itself, and those are very clear. There are very clear data points which firms can use to measure themselves against. And I think one of the earlier questions that you raised was to Alex and about stagnation. And it wouldn't surprise me if firms across the industry were able to point to improved ethnic minority representation, but I'd also not be surprised to hear if there had been a slight slowdown in the rate of growth, and clearly more has to be done. So it's about holding ourselves as participants in this market accountable and looking to the numbers and seeing what we can do to try and improve and promote our ethnically diverse talent.
Amazing, thank you. So straight after dive in, we're going into Black History Month. And just as a small plug, I've seen lots of amazing events in the market. So everyone, please do keep an eye out on websites, LinkedIn's, and get signed up for as many as you can. A question to you all. We are having a dinner party, and you all get to invite one historical or famous figure from a Black or ethnically diverse background, and for the sake of argument, dead or alive. Who would it be and why? And we'll go in order of Rabia, Kavan, Bao, Nancy, and then Alex.
I think I would probably be just being relevant with life at the moment, probably go with Frida Kahlo. I think my daughter is going as her for History Day this Friday. I think it's a story about overcoming adversity. I think recognizing your strengths and really kind of pushing through life's challenges. And I think that's something that we all do to our workplace. And I think in the context of our discussions as well, I think that's quite important. So that's who I would invite. And I love art as well. So an added bonus.
I think that's me next. I think without doubt, it would probably have to be Lewis Hamilton. Apart from being a huge motor sports enthusiast, I think Lewis is incredibly inspirational. He's one of the few sports persons who uses his platform to actually speak out. And of course, he's incredibly inspirational in all that he's achieved within the sport. So yeah, I'd go with Lewis.
Thank you. Is it me next? I can't remember the order. I would have to say Michelle Obama for me. I think the way that she's navigated all of the adversity that she's faced, she's done it with grace, she's done it with elegance, she's done it with intellect. And she's got that famous saying where she talks about when they go low, we go high. And it's all about keeping your head high and continuing on your path and being resilient. And yeah, I can't think of anybody else who's faced as many challenges as she has, and she's just navigated it so well. And on top of all of that, she's just a real human being. So I'll pass it over on that.
I think it's me next. So I asked my husband this question last night as to what he thought I would say, and he got it straight away. So my invite would be Aretha Franklin. Obviously not with us anymore, so we'd have to go back in time. But she is my all-time favorite singer. Sings my favorite song, "Say a Little Prayer." Yeah, amazing soul singer, and also, you know, women's activist, civil rights activist. Yeah, that would be my pick.
I guess it's me up next. So I played a bit fast and loose with the term famous. So I'm actually going to go with my granddad's great granddad, right? And the reason I'm going to do that is because he was an indentured slave that was taken from India and then transported to the West Indies, Guyana. So and he eventually bought himself out of slavery. So I would really want to hear the story about the scenario he was when in India, the moving from India to a brand new country that, you know, and then how he eventually kind of got out of that slavery. And then, yeah, that story would be really impactful for me, and I'd love to hear it.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. I always kind of thought I knew who my guest would be for a dinner party, but you've all given some really good answers. I might need to revisit mine and start from scratch again. So thank you all so much. That was as amazing as I knew it would be. I'd like to thank you for your openness and transparency, especially around the lived experiences. I know how hard these can be to not only remember, but to discuss. As I said at the start, we will have a chance for questions at the end, but please do feel free to start popping them into the chat. So moving into the second part of our session, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Lomas, Head of Culture at Lloyds, Suneeta Padda, Director of Padda Consulting and Deputy Chair of Rattle, and Dauda Jammeh, Head of Financial Operations at Beazley. So thank you very much all for joining me today. And Mark, I'd like to start with you, please. In November 2023, Lloyds and Black Beyond Data published their finding into Lloyds' involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Why was it important that Lloyds acknowledge their past? And when you set out on this mission, what did you want to achieve? It would also be good to understand why Lloyds went around the research, how they did, as I know it was independently funded.
Great, thank you, Ty. Yeah, why did we think it was important? I think to understand that fully, you have to start in 2020 when Lloyds issued its apology for its role in transatlantic slavery and made some interim ethnicity commitments. That included hiring an archivist and also delving into and undertaking some research. Forward on a couple of years, you know, we published a culture strategy that said we wanted to be a destination for global talent. Well, if you want to be a destination for global talent and diverse talent, you have to be open and transparent. So that was very important. it was a unique way to go about the research, and it was very important, the standard of ethics that we entered into the research with. So Black Beyond Data from Johns Hopkins University published the research and undertook the research. It was both editorially independent, so Lloyd's didn't get to edit the narrative, and also financially independent. I think this was really important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it established sort of credibility and trust because there was a high level of ethical consideration. And the second was that the outcome of the research was never intended to be an academic report. And the outcome of the research has been a digital humanities archive called Underwriting Souls. That's available for people to access all around the globe. Will be supported in perpetuity by the Mellon Foundation. And hopefully it will spark further interest and further research, because it certainly lays out the complexity of the business that sat behind slavery. I think it was also really important to have an advisory board made up of UK cultural institutions, which then had a say in helping the team from Black Beyond Data curate the Underwriting Souls website. And if anyone hasn't visited the Underwriting Souls website, I would really encourage that. I think the other thing that was really key and that helped to shape, not only the research but the response, were the number of focus groups we have. There were kind of 200 Black and ethnically diverse colleagues across the market. For them to give their views on parts of the research, like case studies with Angerstein, some of the historical objects, and help shape our thinking in terms of the Inclusive Futures program, which was the Lloyd's response. But I think it was critically important that that research was conducted at the highest ethical standards, both editorially independent of Lloyd's and financially independent. I think that was absolutely crucial.
I'm quite glad you just touched on the focus groups we had there, because we're lucky enough to be joined by Dauda, who was a member of one of the focus groups. So Dauda, I'd just like to bring you in to talk about your experience, kind of give us the inside scoop of what the ask was when you were approached to be on the focus group, and also how authentic the experience felt.
Yeah, pleasure. I think the things I recall from the feeling, I'll talk a lot about the feeling of being asked to participate in a focus group. I think at the outset, there's a level of excitement about, right? The acknowledgement by Lloyd's shows a lot of humility from my perspective, from an observer's view, I think. And then to be involved in a focus group where actually it's inviting sort of the voices of the ethnic representation in the market kind of also was a bold step to make it as transparent as possible. So the feeling I had at the time was one of curiosity, and sort of I encountered it through a connection at work who said, this is happening, would you like to get involved? We had a couple of representations from my organization at Beasley, so we took a couple of seats and joined the conversation. Now, the initial conversations it was important, I think, from a feeling standpoint, again, to almost ensure that it was a safe space, almost non-judgmental, right? So depending on how you approached it, from my angle, the curiosity led. And so we listened to sort of how the focus group was going to be run. It was very, very well organized. In my view, I think, as transparent as they could have been, to kind of describe to us what they're looking for, what kind of, how we should feel comfortable in sharing our perspectives, and the fact that we would be listened to as well was important. So I think that was brilliant. As the focus groups sort of continued to convene and listen to the findings, which were developing as we went along, we got to a point where I think there was a strong craving for the focus groups to involve some reciprocal conversations between members of the focus group that kind of represented a certain demographic, and also bringing in the allyship that would have represented a different angle to the conversation. So I think that was one really, really striking example to me of when we were heard in sort of interacting and offering our views, which I think was a consensus across the different people involved in it. So generally, I would say the scoop is we really felt heard, at least take it from me. I felt like the involvement of the archivist, Mark himself, and various people who embraced the focus group and ensured that we were all comfortable also helped us to kind of really convey our feelings and our sort of thoughts, which I saw that it was translated into sort of some of the way that Lloyd's articulated the messages, and they were very open and again transparent with what they were coming across, albeit it's a fragmented picture that anyone can attempt to try and pull together because it's happened so many years ago. But at the same time, it gave us a feeling that actually we are approaching this in the best way possible, and we were getting to a place where we felt like our voice was part of the conversation.
Thanks, Dauda. And as Mark mentioned in his answer, Inclusive Futures was created as a response to the research, which I have the privilege of managing the programme. And I have to say, for many reasons, it's definitely been the highlight of my career so far. Mark, using the opportunity, could you tell us a little bit more about the Inclusive Futures programme and what impact we are hoping to see over the next 10 years, which is the duration of the programme? And also, I'm sure a lot of people would be interested to hear the links with Inclusive Futures and the issue we seem to have of retaining Black and ethnically diverse talent within the market.
Sure, great. I think it was really important as we went through the process of developing Inclusive Futures. There was one message that I kept hearing really consistently from the focus group, and that was, yes, we want programs that prepare and bring people into the workplace, but that's not enough. We want to see that kind of career ladder throughout mid-career right to the top. And that while Lloyd's is based in London, those impacts were global. And the views of the focus group were absolutely central to kind of how Inclusive Futures ended up. So Inclusive Futures is a program with a range of initiatives from the classroom to the boardroom and beyond the workplace. So it starts with the school's engagement program, which will kick off after this October half term. The early careers talent pool managed by one of our delivery partners, Equity, to Black underwriters, then started ACIN, which has evolved into Equity and our delivery partner for the early careers talent pool. We then have the Accelerate Career Development Program, which is now an award winning program, which is brilliant, and also a mentoring program that sits alongside the kind of bursary program. We then, of course, have the Accelerate Masters, which will kick in next year, and the board level talent pool, which is about creating that pool of talent at the very top of the industry going forward, and of course our bursary cohort. And I'm going to be really proud when that first bursary cohort is in place, beginning of October. But it's not just that. It's about how Lloyd supports the conversation around race equality. And we've been the headline sponsor for Race Equality Matters, who kind of fund Race Equality Week for the last few years. That now reaches 5 million people, 5,000 organizations involved. And since Lloyd's has been supporting that, the kind of participation rate from insurance companies has gone from 0.5% to 4% of total participants. So a great increase. And we've seen this kind of consistent focus throughout the talent pipeline makes a big difference over time. One of the things I think I'm most proud of is how the 1 in 3 hiring ambition has been working in the market. Since 2021, 5,000 ethnically diverse hires have come in to the market through the 1 in 3 hiring ambition. And Inclusive Futures is meant to sustain that progress. And over the period of Inclusive Futures, I would expect thousands of employment opportunities. I would also expect hundreds of ethnically diverse students to be supported through undergraduate education, and Accelerate alumni to be supported through master's programs. And then we look beyond the workplace, where, for example, impact investments worth $50 million have been made with the African Development Bank and the American Development Bank to support projects and programs around the world. Accelerator is now reaching the US. And I think we know that we still have more to go. We still know we won't get everything right. We'll have to adjust. But memorial is really important, so never forgetting. And there will be a permanent memorial in the Lloyd's building, which we hope will launch in February. That design has been agreed. And of course, the Flint Lectures, named after the first Black broker, which will take place this October. So Inclusive Futures is a broad-ranging program. And again, I think it's very important, the breadth of the program, and that it was informed, like Dauda said, with the voices of the ethnically diverse groups that participated in the focus groups, as well as kind of challenge from expert advisors from diversity, academia, and finance. So it's early in the program, but it has definitely begun. And I have a lot of confidence in all the firms that have come in to help fund and participate in Inclusive Futures, and our delivery partners, Equity, Green Park for the board level talent pool, and the Lloyd's of London Foundation administering the bursary program. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to see how it embeds over the next 6 months, and we'll hold ourselves accountable by publishing reports probably within the next 6 to 12 months about how the program has got started.
Dauda, just off the back of that, I'm going to come back to you. I seem to be giving you all the tricky questions today. Are you happy with where Lloyd's landed with their response with Inclusive Futures? And it would be interesting if you could also tell me what accountability does look like to you.
Yeah, so I think overall, this was always going to be a tough ask for anyone to look back at their past and figure out a way on, how do we make a difference and make a significant one, and one that's sustainable. So I think the way Lloyd's has articulated that and presented it to the market is I'm happy with, on the basis that it's actually quite inclusive. So the Inclusive Futures, it's not just the Lloyd's thing, it's all the participants that stepped up to take part and make this a lot bigger than what Lloyd's could possibly do. And I think it was a starting point for Lloyd's to do what it did, and then hopefully make that infectious so other partners can come on board and actually, contribute and help make a difference to change the face of the industry that we're all in. So I think from that standpoint, it was significant as a response and as a summary to something that was sort of very topical, built a lot of anticipation from people who had ancestry that might have been affected by it, for people who struggled to reconcile, their identity in an industry that had a past like this. So I think in that respect, I think they did a good job of also getting counsel from the focus groups to kind of, provide a pulse reading or a pulse check on, how would this land and how can we make it stick. So accountability for me is what the last thing Mark said, tell us the results. How is it performing? What difference and impact is this having? Because it's always good to kind of put the sort of glossy, nice words around a program, and we tend to, over the years, it fades into the background, and it was once upon a time, and no one's following it up in terms of accountability. So I think the people and the organizations that have subscribed to support it are fully committed. We've heard from the initial section of this panel where people talk a lot about the different initiatives, efforts that organizations are doing individually. This is a collaborative effort. It's we can do this. And I think the accountability is for each and every one of us in our own organizations, starting with the individuals, asking the question consistently, can we do more? And I think that's what we heard. And I also think, publicizing the results and showing that accountability and continuing the humility that Lloyd's has shown to say, this is where we think we can improve. This is what we were aiming for. This is where we got to. We're pivoting in this way, or we're doing this X, Y, and Z to try and take it to the next level. I think as we continue to do that, that's what I would expect from Lloyd's and from all the participants. And that's what accountability looks like to me.
Accountability being a key word there, I think. And Suneeta, I'd like to bring you into the conversation as Deputy Chair of RATTLE. For those of you who don't know, RATTLE stands for Race Action Through Leadership and was launched in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. RATTLE was a collaborative initiative bringing together senior insurance leaders of colour and senior board level leaders from across the industry to create a stronger voice to influence change within the industry. RATTLE is also a sponsor of Inclusive Futures. So my question, Suneeta, is how do you hold leaders accountable? And do you have any case studies that you can share with us on how you have done that?
Yes, sure. Thanks for the introduction, Ty. So we've heard that word accountable. We've heard like having that safe space in a non-judgmental fashion. So what RATTLE is about is we hold leaders to account through using data. So who are these leaders that can be ambassadors of RATTLE? They are CEOs or chairs. That's very strict in terms of it's people feeling comfortable and safe to be able to have those open, honest conversations with their peers. So what do we do? So the first thing that we did, we developed a race fluency questionnaire. We gathered some data, we've heard that word mentioned by everyone, because how can we measure that we're actually making a difference and progress? And one of the ways in which we do that is by gathering the data to see how firms are progressing over time. So the questionnaire that we initially developed, and we will be sending out a follow-up questionnaire just before Christmas, is a blend of both qualitative and quantitative metrics. So we're looking at racial diversity within leadership teams. We're looking at what that pipeline looks like. It's all very well if you've got a diverse board or a diverse leadership team today, but what's that pipeline looking like? And looking at what KPIs you've got, how are you linking those to diversity outcomes? And, I'll bring in a little bit of compliance jargon here. Everything is being measured around outcomes. So how are we measuring the outcomes? But it does help us create a clear picture of where certain organizations stands in terms of diversity and inclusion, where improvements are needed. So, for example, we've looked at what percentage of leadership teams are from ethnically diverse backgrounds, whether D&I goals are tied to remuneration, or there's objectives set within an organization. Are they actually SMART objectives? Do you actually measure those? And are you able to track those? And then we can look at why we are not moving the dial, or why things are static, or what is it, and having those discussions in that safe space amongst the peers, the CEOs having that conversation with their peers. So data's helping us to understand the landscape, but that's just one of the necessary foundations for the accountability. Because if leadership isn't meeting their diversity goals, whilst this is just one element of it and one starting point, there needs to be some tough conversations around how and why we improve that. And that's where we have those conversations in those forums. And we don't have many. We maybe have twice a year or 3 times a year at most, where we bring the CEOs and chairs together to have those open conversations. You asked about case studies. Now, I think somebody on the panel already talked about one of their case, how they measure diversity and inclusion. And their CEO is also an ambassador of RATTLE. So one of the ones where I'd like to highlight is around, setting objectives for everybody across the organization, tying people's remuneration to those particular objectives as well, in order to meet those specific D&I targets. We do that in when we measure anything else around the business. How much business are you bringing in? Oh, you didn't bring in enough, so that's tied to your remuneration. Diversity isn't an initiative, it's not a journey, it's BAU. So put the same measures in place, and then you can see how transformative that is or not. So link it to bonuses, have measurable objectives, and that's what one of the firms have done. So if firms can see measurable increase in that ethnic diversity with their talent pipeline, then it isn't just about the quotas, and it isn't just about, but it's more about changing the system, challenging the processes, and challenging so that we can change those things. So I think that's one of the case studies. Another one would be using data collected through Rattle to revise their succession planning. Look at, well, actually, our pipeline looks pretty weak. We've got a good, we've ticked the box today. I hate using that phrase, but it's true. We've got a diverse board today, but what about tomorrow? What about next year? What about the year after? It's all about that succession planning. So using that data to see how you can shift the dial and make sure you've got appropriate succession planning in place. So our accountability is around data, having something measurable. It's not around quotas and it's not around ticking boxes.
Thanks, Suneeta. And yeah, completely agree with everything you said. How do we develop those conversations? From your consultancy, from Rattle, how do you foresee these conversations going now?
I think I would like diversity to be integral to businesses. It shouldn't be something that sits, we've got to measure diversity, or the regulators putting something out there and there's a quota out there and we've got to do this. Because then, there was an interesting conversation last night, or a presentation around where meritocracy and actually, people don't want a job because I certainly don't. I don't want a job because I'm a woman and I'm from an ethnic background. I want the job because I'm the best person for that job. But in order to select from a diverse pool, we've got to have enough candidates coming in. So from my perspective, it's making sure that it's integral to a business in terms of, we saw, I wrote everyone's names down, Nancy talk about, it's the starting point. What's the starting point? What's the hiring process? What's the communication? So in order for us to move the dial and move forward, we really need to have all of this integral to what we do. I'll stop there. No.
Thanks, Suneeta. Dauda, as I said earlier, I'm giving you all the hard ones today. I'd like to touch on some of the discussions we had in the first part of the panel around lived experiences. And as someone touched on, we've had the recent riots in the UK where Black and ethnically diverse people were targeted. This is a kind of a 2-3-part question. How do we navigate the world we live in? And also, it would be good to understand from you, as someone who has been in the industry for a while, does it look different to when you first joined? And if it doesn't, what do you continue to do as very often being the only Black man in the room?
Wow. Thanks for that. Hopefully I'm doing okay taking these tough ones, but I'm sure the other panelists will also chime in. Does it look different to when I first joined the industry? Absolutely. I think just to give people a sense, when I joined the industry, the personality of the organizations have changed so dramatically. And I think post George Floyd that's when it was really evident that sort of leadership teams and execs were really keen to make a difference. If I personalize the response, I would say I have evolved since I joined the industry. When I first joined the industry, I was a completely different personality on the outward side of things to what I am now. And I think the reason for it was because initially, I think the feeling I got from the industry was that it wasn't ready for the change. So there was a lot of suppression in who I am now, because that's what I needed to do to get by. Today, I think there's more of a respect to inclusivity, diversity, all of the things that we've heard people talk about. And I think when you go to organizations, it's at the forefront, it's a poster on the door, whether there's a gap between what they're saying and what they're doing, it's a topical conversation. And I think to a degree, that's created an opportunity or space for people to be able to bring some of themselves, or as much of themselves that they can bring to work. I'll give you a real life example. So of late, I take a lot of pride in wearing sort of my African inspired shirts or anything. I don't have one on today, but it's something that's just a part of who I am, and I embrace that and I enjoy it. I don't think I would have been comfortable wearing it when I joined the industry because it just wasn't something I saw. So I'm not the only one doing that today, but seeing other people normalizing it makes me feel comfortable and make me feel like it's acceptable. So it's very simple things that I think, what can I do more if it isn't different to what I saw when I started? I'm saying that it is. And I think the things that have made it different are little things like bringing yourself and bringing your dimensions of your personality or aspects of who you are and trying to normalize it, because often chances are no one said you can't do it, it's just you're not comfortable doing it. And that's because of the culture, that's because of the intangibles that isn't really a signposted thing, but we know these are the unspoken norms that form how we behave and how we act in a certain space.
Thanks, Dauda. I was at a debate last night as part of Dive In where it was discussed if D&I initiatives are doing more harm than good. I know personally I've seen a lot of articles, a lot of LinkedIn posts around is D&I dead, are ERGs dead, or they're not being effective. Mark, as head of culture at Lloyd's, it would be great to get your insight and your thoughts on this. And I think the real question is, why do you think there is a recent increase in the pushback of all things D&I? What is playing a role? And it would be also good if you have any advice to companies, how they still support colleagues in a tangible way.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, this is a complex question, but I think at the root of it, it is easier to appeal to fear and perceived loss of advantage than it is to appeal to sort of common sense or kind of more altruistic values. And I think we've seen a huge kind of uptick in the kind of appealing to fear, hatred, etc., through the political discourse. I think we've seen the media discourse become more and more and more polarized. So you're on one side of the conversation or other. It's much harder to have that kind of centrist discourse and discussion in a respectful manner, even if we don't agree on everything. And I also think the cost of living challenges, cost of education challenges, increased competition in the workforce. This always kind of breeds a bit of resentment when people feel they're losing out. And that idea of losing out is something that I think you have to tackle straight on. And this idea that we live in a meritocracy because we don't live in a meritocracy. And yet people feel when you talk about leveling the playing field, you're talking about basically tipping the balance in favor of someone else. And that's not the case. Leveling the playing field often means more objective, fair competition. That's what it means. And that always has the effect of delivering more diversity. Pretty much always. I'm a big believer in you don't fix the people. There's nothing wrong with the Black people or the Asian people or anything else. You fix the process so that it's an objective and fair competition and you get diversity through that. But that can be a challenge if you believe that we live in a meritocracy where network and connections deliver opportunities. And some people may feel like rowing that backwards or diminishing the impact of network and connections is directly challenging to them, and they feel they're losing out. But that is the way of the world. And if I reflect on the efforts that Lloyd's has undertaken with partners like the LMG, LIBA, LMA, and others over the last few years in terms of outreach, you see it in our early careers applications, right? We want to be that destination for talent. We're reaching a magnificently diverse cohort. We're starting to change how people think about careers in insurance. And we got 7,000 plus applications for 28 places. Right? That is a huge amount of applications for a small amount of places. What does that mean? That means that the people that get through that process and are employed for those 28 places are superb talents. They go through a very robust selection process, and they happen to be an extremely diverse group. So the backlash to DEI, and I think there is a discussion to have. You know, if you do DEI badly, then that's not a good thing. But DEI done well is about putting in place effective and objective competition. When that happens, diversity flourishes, and that, unfortunately, is not something that everyone thinks is a good outcome. But I'm pretty encouraged because despite the rhetoric in places at times, despite the polarization at times, I think there is a quiet majority that understands that when all sections of society do better, the whole society does better. And I think you often hear from a very vocal, loud minority and not the vast majority who understand when we talk about diversity and inclusion, that means everyone. And it's really broad. So I think my takeaway on that would be leveling the playing field is about objective competition. And let's embrace that. There shouldn't be a problem with that. That is the meritocracy people like to talk about.
It's a good way to go into our final question. So a lot of early career cohorts would have started in many firms in September. Hopefully we have a few on the call. So hello and welcome to the market. To all three of you, if you could go back to your 18 or 20, 21-year-old self, you're in your first corporate job, what piece of advice would you give to yourself? For example, mine would be to not be too scared to wear my natural hair. I have really thick curly hair, which is not out today. I know that is more because I am lazy to manage it of late. Not that I'm actually embarrassed or feel that it's unprofessional in the workplace. So yes, to all the young ladies on the call with natural 3B, 4B, 4C hair, please do feel comfortable and confident enough to wear it. The second one would be, and this is actually really embarrassing to say, and I know I've got some friends and colleagues who are probably going to message me after this. I never used to correct people when they said my name wrong. I would even remember how specific people mispronounce it so I could answer in a timely manner. Now, luckily, probably 7, 8, 9 times I get asked before if I meet someone for the first time. I also do correct people, and I also utilize the Race Equality Matters tool. So in my email signature, I have #mynameiS, and it spells out how my name is pronounced. So I would encourage everyone to utilize that as well. Not for anyone with, you know, a unique name. I know, Mark, you have yours in there as well. It is a really helpful tool. So let's start with Suneeta, Dauda, and then Mark.
Right, now that's a very difficult one for me. How do I pronounce your name? It's a very difficult one for me because I actually didn't start work till I was 36. So, but what I would go back to myself and say is, be myself, as in, don't have this preconception that people who work in the city wear bowler hats and you have to dress in a certain type of uniform and you can't take the bag that you want to into work because it has to be like the form of a briefcase. And that's another story for another day. But yeah, be yourself, be your authentic self, and be comfortable with what you wear and how you come to work. I know that's easy to say now, but going back in time, that's what I would give. That's the advice I would give to myself.
And I will add on to that and say it's not being afraid of. I think often a lot of people are happy to ideate and talk about the art of the possible and what should be done. And I think there's a different sort of follow up to that, which is following through on ideas and putting your hand up and being willing to get involved to make that difference. And the way I describe it to people in our organization is, well, often we will do events, we'll do fantastic things, and we've had a new joiner who comes in and says, oh, the environment, the culture here is amazing. And my response is, well, imagine how much more amazing it could be once you add your magic to it. right? So I think it's about people feeling like they also have a contribution to make, because this is what diversity is. It's you bringing in a little bit of yours, I bring in a little bit of mine, we mix it together and we make a fantastic whatever it is that we make up. But I think it's feeling comfortable with yourself, accepting yourself, and sort of being willing to kind of put yourself, expose yourself, and say, you know, whether this is popular or unpopular, I'm going to give it a go and I'm going to stick my neck out for it. And I believe in it, so I'm going to do it. So I'll just encourage people, or myself, my young self, to say, you know, believe in yourself and feel comfortable bringing your own magic to the workplace. It doesn't have to be what you've seen or what somebody else has done. Be comfortable being unique. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Mark.
Great. My 21-year-old self, what would I say? I think I would say it's going to be all right. I think that's what I would say to my 21-year-old self. And the advice I would give is to take absolutely every opportunity to learn and engage with different people. Make saying yes to opportunities that come your way kind of the default position. Believe that a vast majority of people will want to help you if you reach out to them for their advice. Don't be afraid to pick the sense from the nonsense sometimes. And the other thing I would say to myself is actually some of the best advice you're going to get is the advice you need to hear, not necessarily the advice you want to hear. And I think in my career, I've been really, really lucky to have people at key times that have done exactly that for me. So the overall message would be it's going to be all right in the end.
I mean, I'm definitely not 18 or 21, but I tell myself multiple times a day, it's going to be all right. So that's one to keep going, I think. Thank you so much to the three of you for that discussion. It's really valuable to have your experience and expertise in the industry. For anyone interested in finding out a little bit more about Inclusive Futures or Deloitte's Underwriting Souls research into the transatlantic slave trade, please do check out the website. The details should be on the screen, or please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Right, so let's move into the questions, and we have had a few coming through. I will bring everyone back into the chat for this from the previous session as well. And the first one is, this doesn't have a name, but I think I will give this one to Mark and Dauda, please. I'm a white woman married to a black man who I have a beautiful little girl with, so these topics are really important to me. As an ally, what can I do beyond being welcoming to all and speaking up when it is needed in the workplace?
Great. Well, I'm happy to go. I'm happy to go first. I also have a white partner and two very light-skinned children. So what would I suggest? And you know, I am no parental authority. Let's make that clear. Pride in who you are and where you come from, all parts of your background. I think number one, that's what you got to instill in your children, those kind of values from an early perspective, but also a bit of honesty. So, you know, sometimes the challenge that my daughter, who's now 21, had was people would say kind of racially derogatory things around her because they didn't really realize she was black. And that was her challenge, and knowing when to take that on head on, and how to handle that was kind of one of the challenges that we had to discuss. Things people would never say in front of me that they would say in front of her. So I think that openness is really important. Openness and honesty. And then I think I go back to something I said earlier, which is the vast majority of people want to see you do well, but there will be challenges. I think just being open to that, and as a white ally, just be curious, learn, I know when, it is the right time to step in and be very firm with something, and then when it's the right time to offer people an opportunity to learn, either by, having a question or discussion or pulling them aside. I think instinctively you'll know that everyone knows their own children. So everything I've said, I'm going to put on the caveat: I am no parental expert.
Well said, Mark. I'll suggest, I think there's two dimensions to allyship, right? There's things that you have skin in the game of, and there's things that you are more distant, that you feel can improve, or you care about or are passionate about, that you want to support. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So from a gender perspective, as much as I'm a new dad and I'm supportive of my wife and being there and wanting to be a devoted dad, I'm never going to quite really understand the unique struggles women go through, but I have a role to play in supporting my family and supporting my wife. So it just means that, there's a level of understanding, but also listening with empathy, as Mark was saying. And I think, another off-center example would be, we can talk a lot about the topics that we care most about and the way we look at life through the frames that we experienced about. One thing that made me realize that I don't know everything is when I was talking to a left-handed person who told me what a day in the life of a left-handed person is like. I don't think I never stopped for a moment to advocate for left-handed people before then. But suddenly I realized life can be hard, depending on what you're going through. So it's a matter of, understanding that we don't know everything, but you can humbly be interested in other people's challenges, issues, listen with empathy, and just be curious. So a lot of what Mark already said, but I just wanted to give you some practical examples that there are topics out there, and we can all sort of almost have a default assumption that we're doing right by everything, but there's some things that we're just more distant from than other things. But it's about, once you're willing to do something about it, as opposed to saying, well, I'm here to help, just tell me what I need to do. I think, if your neighbor's house was on fire, I don't need to tell you to pick up a bucket and try and put it out or help someone to safety. So it's just kind of putting one and one together and sort of being curious and being open is what I would say.
And maybe if I could just add a little bit as well. So I think being a mum to a 7-year-old daughter, I'm kind of constantly battling whether I'm doing enough. So can definitely echo some of just the motherly concern, but then I guess also share your experience, your personal experience. You have a unique insight having grown up as a white child. And I think just really kind of sharing your experiences and where necessary, highlighting the differences of how your daughter's experiences differ from that, in part being shaped by her ethnicity. And I also kind of think you're in a unique position to also encourage others to become allies. From my experience, people are often involved in initiatives if they themselves are directly impacted or know others that are impacted by it. But really to kind of have the greatest impact, I think we need to foster understanding and empathy amongst others. And I think if I'm asking for someone to be involved in comparison to whether if you're asking someone to be involved, can have a very different impact as well. So I think encouraging others to also become allies and promoting that understanding of marginalized groups is really important.
Thank you all. There's been another question that is for all panelists, but just for time, I think I'll go to Alex and Bal on this one. Please, can you speak a bit about what appears to be glass ceiling and tools available in this network, like free training, coaching, mentoring, networking, etc., to help create, oh, sorry, my screen jumped, to help create an equal playing field for disadvantaged groups to excel in their careers?
I can quickly go first. I wasn't sure whether Alex wanted to go first. Yeah, look, I think we mentioned a lot of these tools. So maybe I'll just draw on a couple that have helped me personally through my career. And I think one of the key things for me has been that mentorship. And I think having a mentor, a senior member in the organization, just being able to create that space for me where he was able to pick out my blind spots effectively, and kind of let me know where are the areas that maybe I needed to do some more self-awareness or do some training or maybe even build my network. I think, probably as early as 6 years ago, I certainly wouldn't be sitting on a panel like this. I probably wouldn't be at a networking event. I wouldn't know how to approach somebody. And I think 6 years ago, I probably would have thought that was a crazy question to ask for help on. And I think that's where mentorship can really help, because they can provide not only insights into how to approach some of those difficult conversations that might feel difficult to you, but also give you some real hands-on tips on how to go about some of those things. So I think mentorship is key. And I think for me, just staying curious, just being self-aware and continuing to learn about some of the areas that maybe you're not proficient in, whether that's technical or non-technical, can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, no, but I kind of agree. I think I like the mentorship bit. I always think everyone overthinks mentoring. And for me, I've always preferred the informal route of just finding someone that you like the way they present or the way they come across, and have a chat with them, or what I call a chin wag over a coffee or whatnot. I think from my perspective, the kind of tools that are out there, we work with some great third-party partners or charities. So I think we've heard ICANN and Equity that some of the other panelists have spoken about. They've got loads of great tools and things and resources that we've lent into and brought into the business as a business resource group. But also find out who your HR managers are. Build those relationships. I think we don't need to go in it as alone. It's the partnership with your HR team to see what they've got, what they advise. They're the experts in these areas, and we act as that voice, and you partner to kind of build those tools as well.
Kavan, I'd like to come with you with this question. There's been a lot of activity in the market over the past few years focused on increasing ethnic diversity. What would you say your biggest learning to date has been?
I think the need to persevere and to ensure that everything that you have previously done doesn't feel like an accomplishment that you can, I suppose, pin to your lapel. It's about making sure that everything that we do stays current in the minds of everyone within the market. There's always the next generation to try and help, the next young lawyer who's waiting to come through the doors, who needs our assistance and perhaps a little bit of help. So it's about ensuring that everything that we're doing occupies a certain amount of mind share, and not losing that enthusiasm and zeal for what we've been trying to achieve to get to this point so far. There's still so much to do.
Thank you. And one for Mark and Suneeta. Can you discuss the fact that some companies may not desire to publish D&I data / KPIs because they know the numbers aren't good? The company has to start somewhere. So how can companies move beyond this self-imposed barrier?
Mark, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, so I think, yeah, you've got to start somewhere. But if today we are saying that this company in question, their results are so bad that they are really embarrassed, then we are clearly not engaging everybody in terms of moving forward collectively on diversity and inclusion. So I think it's about holding people to account. Yes, it's embarrassing if you don't want to publish your results, but do you measure those internally? I think there's a lot more to be said. It's like, you produce the results. What are you doing about it? Are you measuring them internally? Are you setting the targets for your people? And have you looked at where your pain points are? Why aren't you meeting those targets? Why isn't the organization meeting those targets? Or the results aren't better? Sorry, I shouldn't say targets. Why aren't the results better? Why aren't they more diverse? So I think it's having that real root cause analysis of why is it that you wouldn't want to publish those? What are the pain points? What are the problem points? Because, at Rattle, and now, with our work collaborating with Inclusive Futures, I think it is about helping CEOs and chairs. So maybe whoever it is that's asked the question would want to put their CEO and chair forward to be an ambassador at Rattle to get that support and get that help, because after all, this is a collective, collaborative piece of work that we are doing. We're holding people to account, but also CEOs and chairs will hold each other to account. So maybe that might be something you might want to look at. Mark?
Right, yeah. Why don't people want to publish, and what would happen if they did? I think my experience of that is a talent that's looking at your organization welcomes openness and welcomes transparency. And the rhetoric kind of needs to match the reality. So it's no point saying, we're an equal opportunities employer, we have a fantastic culture, people join, and that's not the case. You might as well be open and demonstrate to people that you're making efforts. You've put some goals in place. You're working towards them. I've always found that is far more authentic and far more impactful. And I don't think there's a drawback as long as you're committed to doing something about it. And I think that's the key. If you're committed to doing something about it, then your starting point shouldn't be the issue. Measuring progress towards what you want to achieve should be where you focus, and that's what I would say. There's no point being afraid of it. There's not an organization in the UK that's got perfect representation all throughout the structure, or at least not one that I'm aware of. So so don't be afraid of the starting point. How you be measured is by the goals you set and what you do towards them.
Amazing. Thank you to everyone for your questions, and apologies to the ones that we didn't get to. As promised at the start, here are our objectives for the session again. I'll leave these up for a few moments just to give everyone a chance to reflect on what they have learned. I would also really encourage everyone after the session to tell 1 or 2 or 3, 4, or 5 colleagues your answers to these bullet points, especially the ones who were unable to join the session today. Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to all of the speakers this afternoon, and also to my working group who has helped put this session together. I really couldn't do it on my own and take all the credit. Jennifer Williams from Marsh McLennan, Ken Keto from AXA XL, Charlotte Caulfield from Gallagher's, and Chanel Couture from Kennedy's. I hope everyone has found this informative, valuable, and most importantly, will continue to keep the conversations on D&I going. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.